Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. I am Menas, and we are in the middle of winter in Australia, but there is always lots of cricket to talk about. And while we're in the doldrums of AFL and NRL, I thought it would be the perfect time to get on old friend of the show who was at the ICC T20 World Cup. He's the host of the Emerging Cricket podcast, which I've seen develop over the years. And he is a cricket broadcaster who does some work for the ICC. Daniel Beswick, welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Manners. I'm not sure how doldrums of the NRL and AFL world feels to me. I do get where you're coming from. As much as I enjoy the winter sport, it's very much cricket that's always front and center. So happy to be talking again cricket with you, Manners.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And we've got a lot to talk about. And while we've got Daniel with us, I thought it would be a great opportunity to step back and look at the health of the game. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about the legacy of the latest T20 World Cup in the States and also the broader development of sort of the further development of Test cricket, where that's headed. And I thought Daniel would bring a different perspective because he focuses a lot on emerging cricket, so the countries that are really rising up in the cricket world. And I believe, Daniel, you'll bring a different perspective to it, a sort of bottom-up view.
Oh, that's good to know. Glad to be a point of difference. It's an interesting time in the international game because I think it's very much a case of taking things away from one resource and putting it to somewhere else rather than an additional, say, sum of funds. Looking at the international game, yes, we've got an ICC Men's T20 World Cup, which is 20 teams now, and I think the format was excellent. I thought the associate teams of that tournament competed well, but there's always kind of a drawback to every sort of good news you sort of hear about the growth of the emerging game. There's always a couple of takeaways and things that have been deprived. When we look at the way that the money is divided up in annual funding, I think the question is always, why are the pieces of the pie cut up the way they are? And relatively speaking, while there's always going to be more given in total sum to say the associate members or the associate part of the pie, it's always not relative to the growth, to the financial growth of the international game. So while we do see a T20 World Cup with 20 teams, that's only, for some teams, it's only really 2 weeks of international action and exposure. And then throughout the rest of the calendar and the pathway events and the way that the ICC events are set up, it means that outside of that, there's not a whole lot of exposure and there's not a whole lot of impetus and energy that's going all the way through. So I think, it's great that we've got 20 teams competing at a T20 World Cup. And one of the benefits, I suppose, of having the T20 World Cup every 2 years is you do get that exposure a little bit quicker and a little bit more as the pathways go on. But yeah, when you get that experience of a T20 World Cup, but then, there's every other experience you have away from that. And I think that's what people don't see a lot is, what's being deprived to have the good things that we get, at a T20 World Cup for, as we said, some of these teams maybe 2 weeks, and then all the struggles that they have, throughout the year and 10 months on top of that, almost 2 years worth of inactivity or deprivation of resource and international play. It makes it kind of hard for people from the outside looking in to really understand because, for many, this is the one and only time they see these teams at a T20 World Cup and they say, oh, it's great, Papua New Guinea are here at a T20 World Cup. But, they don't really see the struggle that sort of goes on, throughout day-to-day cricket life in a lot of these associate members that get to this position.
Yeah, most certainly. And I guess practically, you've got a lot of amateurs who are all of a sudden playing in a professional tournament against professionals being paid a lot of money for their country. So there'd be a big step up there. And I guess so let's focus to begin with on the legacy of the T20 World Cup in the US. So let's start with the good things. Obviously, a great thing for the emerging nations to see the USA make it through to the Super 8's phase of the World Cup. And we also saw good performances from some of the other teams. So there were some bright spots in the tournament.
Oh, yeah, I think on the whole, I think the associates carried themselves particularly well. Even if I look at some of the teams that went winless of the tournament, Papua New Guinea were probably one Andre Russell wicket away from potentially upsetting a tournament co-host in the West Indies at the tournament, and that was early on, and that would have just caused a complete, maelstrom of news and attention. Wanted attention for Papua New Guinea. Probably wouldn't have been great for everyone trying to big up what West Indies cricket is at the moment. But yeah, even looking at the likes of Oman, who at stages pushed Australia in that first group game that Australia had. Scotland weren't far away from knocking off Australia as well. Just look at that particular group.
And Namibia, they probably would have knocked off England.
Yeah, that too. Albeit with all the rain that came down. Was fortunate enough to be in Dallas for that USA-Pakistan match where they won in the Super Over. And I think the biggest takeaway from that particular game, Menners, was that for 90% of that game, USA were in control. I mean, if anything, the Super Over probably flattered Pakistan more than it flattered the USA in that situation. I thought the USA were in control for most of that particular match as well. Canada knocking off Ireland, albeit in New York, which was a little bit of a how do I put this? I suppose given the different variables of that New York surface and that New York location, I suppose it was bound to throw up some different results, and we got that with Canada and Ireland. Yeah, and I think overall, I'm trying to think if there's any sort of associate stories that haven't come to me right away in this particular situation. Uganda getting a victory at the tournament as well with a win over Papua New Guinea. So there were plenty of good stories coming out of the event, and then now it's a case of not only for the American cricket landscape, but also, associate cricket in general, is to keep the impetus and to keep moving forward. Because again, it's all well and good for us to harp on about the memories, 3-4 weeks ago. How substantial is that in the long run?
It's an interesting one. I'm quite plugged into the American media landscape and have a few affiliations with some sports media over there. And you were over in the States. I do think, as a publicity stunt, holding games in New York and then other games in the US did work. I noticed there was broader penetration of cricket into areas that hadn't been before. I mean, they talk about it, with the New York Post having it on the front page, or the New York Times. And I know other media was covering the cricket. There were gambling institutions that were right into it because they wanted people to gamble on it. So I think as a publicity stunt, it did garner a lot of attention. Now, I don't think the average American was walking down the street saying, "Have you heard of this game, cricket, man?" But I do think it did make some waves. But you were on the ground there. What do you think?
I think there's an element of truth to that. Definitely, we saw they take out front pages in the New York Times for advertising, and then there were several news stories across, the tabloids and newspapers across the country. I thought there was a little bit of cut through. I would, flick on the hotel TV and flick through the CNNs and those type of channels, and there was some attention. I saw Andrew Leonard was interviewed a couple of times by CNN when a few news stories broke out, and the thing that people forgot, I think, from the tournament, and given that I suppose the New York situation, the ground might have overshadowed a few situations. If you go down to Dallas is a hotbed of cricket in the USA, and that facility is excellent. You didn't have to do too much to make that up and ready to go for a global event. The one takeaway that I got from being based in Dallas for their 4 games was that you could put that ground in you could put that ground in Nottingham, you could put that ground in Kolkata, you could put that ground in Sydney, in that atmosphere, and it just felt like a T20 World Cup game. All that was different was, the Texan sunset was a little bit different, and here we were where we had volunteers who were great with an American accent telling you, where to go and where your rooms were. That was really the only difference to me. And of course, there's a big South Asian diaspora in the US, and they're trying to tap into that. The number that's been thrown around in terms of how many subcontinental fans there are in the USA has always been, I think, a little bit overblown. I think the magic number has always been 30 million, which I think they've literally just found every single Indian national, Pakistani national, Sri Lankan national, Australian national, and English expat sort of in America and just counted them as cricket fans, for a lack of a better term. But there's a big diaspora. Dallas in particular was full basically all 4 games. I think the only game that struggled was one of the matches that was on a weekday. I think it might have been the USA. No, I think it was actually no. Come to think of it, I think they were all they were close to full. The only one I think that wasn't was maybe that Sri Lanka Bangladesh one, which I think was on a weeknight, and they still had close to a full house there. They only probably have 8,000 seats plus the standing room only tickets that they sell as well. But it was heaving almost every day there. Florida was a little bit disappointing, of course, with the rain as well, only getting one match on. But of course, the elephant in the room is New York, and I think it was worth the supposed risk that was put out. And yes, there was probably a financial loss that was made, but I think you have to kind of give it a chance. I'd rather them the ICC doing too much and not succeeding than not enough and have everyone complain about it. And I think the way that USA was set up, yes, okay, there might have been a case for, the temporary seating and how much that cost and how quickly it was ripped away. Could we have done something a little bit more substantial with that? But you only have to look at the India-Pakistan match, financially speaking, and see how successful that was. I think they were a little bit disappointed in terms of their returns from maybe some of the other matches. But again, if you never go, you never know. I think the slogan was one of those old Australian tourism campaigns. And I think it's the same thing with the US. I mean, they have so many different situational problems from a day-to-day level. American cricket, on the holistic side of things, American cricket has many different differences and problems in its own right. They're very much American only. But yeah, to bring it back to the question, I thought there was a little bit of cut through. I did meet, quite a few American nationals who wanted to just see what it was all about. And, I think we were lucky, especially in Dallas. We had 3 pretty good games. The fourth one, could have swung Netherlands, Nepal. It only really went one way, but it was only really a drop catch in it between that, between that being close and being the result that we had, which was a pretty easy Dutch win in that case. But I think overall, I think there was a little bit of cut through. And again, it's just a case of what goes from here. And USA Cricket being officially put on notice by the ICC, there's plenty of points around that. The local organising committee, which is normally supposed to be the national governing body. So at a T20 World Cup in Australia, Cricket Australia is your local organising committee. In the West Indies legs of the T20 World Cup, Cricket West Indies was the local organising committee. But in the US, USA Cricket had zero involvement, absolutely no involvement. It was done. The local organising committee was actually T20 World Cup Inc., which was kind of an ad hoc committee and organisation that was brought in, I think, in about February. So for them to even put up a tournament with 3 venues and done, with relative success, I think is an amazing tip of the hat to T20 World Cup Inc. And yeah, it also kind of highlights the different problems that USA and cricket in the USA actually has in comparison to some of the associate members and then some of the full members moving forward. If they were ever to move forward and be a bigger member, that they certainly have their own issues.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know anecdotally that for this podcast, the third most downloads usually come from the US. It's normally Australia, England. Surprisingly, after all my anti-English sentiments on this show, they still
that's why they listen. There's a Schadenfreude element, I suppose.
Yeah, fuck them, losers, and keep listening. And then USA is third, and India 4. So, and I've been to Texas and caught a cab from, I think, Houston, the airport, back to my hotel, and I was talking cricket with the cab driver who was from Pakistan originally. So I know what you're saying about it being on the ground. And I do think going to New York was important because it's easy when the cricket's in North Carolina and Dallas for people to forget about it, but you can't ignore the ICC building a cricket ground in New York. Was it perfect? No. Were the pitches adequate? Just like barely adequate. But again, it did make waves in New York. I think it has got the conversation started about cricket. And it reminds me a bit of, and before your time, Daniel, but the 1994 Soccer World Cup that was held in the US. That kind of just sort of, I don't know, broke through a little bit into the mainstream. And from there, soccer in the US has really developed. And so I sort of see cricket in that sense. What about, though, you mentioned before about how you implied before that maybe funding to some of these developed nations could be better, or emerging nations. Do you think then spending $50 million to put a stadium in New York is money well spent, or they're better off actually putting that into emerging cricket?
That is, it's a $1 billion question, man. I think
Answer it. God damn it.
They have look, they've earmarked the USA as one of their big kind of development markets, the ICC, and at least they kind of put their money where their mouth is and went, look, this is what we're going to do to try and sort of move the needle in American cricket. I think it's a great point. I think it depends on where that money's kind of been taken out of the coffers and where's it being applied to and where's it actually coming from. If this is money that they've kind of got left over in the kitty, or this was extra money that was meant to go to, say, the BCCI, then, I mean, we can be all for it. But I think that the fact of the matter is that we're going to sit around at the next sort of annual funding model and say that, look, there are some members of the ICC that receive something like $30,000 a year just to basically keep the lights on. So I suppose there is a huge disparity that needs to be spoken about. But at the same time, it's kind of if it's a long-term investment, if it's a case of, okay, if we put however many $1 million into US cricket now, what are we going to get out of it in 20 years' time, and how financially healthy is international cricket going to be with a strong and prominent USA? Now, the big issue is that there is such a difference in USA cricket because a lot of the other associate members is very much a community. You have the national team that are so in touch with, say, the board, and they're so in touch with grassroots cricket. It's kind of like this holy triangle of cricket development in associate nations. In the USA, there is absolutely no connect at all between those three things. It's a national team that they've essentially parachuted players in to qualify and play 3 years in the US across minor league and now major league cricket to qualify for the US national team. USA cricket is essentially a shell of itself, and certainly not an organization. It's a non-compliant organization according to the ICC. So the governing body that runs day-to-day operations in the USA is not really working out. And that in ipso facto kind of feeds into the grassroots system where you've got all these pockets of club cricket around the USA, but there's no connection between any of them. And there's quite a lot of private enterprise and private organizations in US cricket that actually take money through, say, cricket academies and stuff like that to develop junior talent. There isn't not really this Australian model that we've all grown up with where, it's very much a public system which transcends, socioeconomic levels in Australia. The one proud thing we can say as Australians is that, we've had cricketers come through, from poor socioeconomic backgrounds, and we've had, people come in from middle class and higher up. In the USA, you don't really have that. So for the ICC to kind of turn around and put all this money into that US system, they're almost betting that they're kind of just going to sort themselves out in the USA, when at the moment there's actually no organization to bring it all together. And I think, that's when the question gets raised, where this money goes, could it be better allocated in other places? And if we're taking, the resources and a bat and ball away from a kid in Vanuatu or a kid in Uganda, then are we really doing the game, justice it deserves? I think it's more of a case of, well, let's look 5 or 10 years down the track and see what we take out of this financially, that we can move back into the ICC coffers and then reallocate to the ICC members. It's very much a long game, but I mean, that doesn't, help people sleep at night who are working in associate, member nations now who want, let's say, instant results or results in the next 5 years because, you're just pushing things down the road. People want results now. It's very much a results-based orientated thing. Hence the scorecard system and the way that funds are set up, is directly proportionate a lot of the time to success on the field too. So look, from that point of view, I would suggest in some ways, no, it's not beneficial for everyone else, but that's a short-term thing. In 10 years' time, if we do see some financial prosperity come out of this, as long as it goes back into an ICC system that reallocates the funds, then I'm all for it. But time will only tell in that situation. It's, a 5-10 year investment.
True. So I guess if we sort of reflect on the T20 World Cup, it does get a big tick. Expanded competition. It got off relatively well without any major hitches. It looked like they might have to pull the pin on New York after one day. And then I guess from what you're saying, the legacy piece, we just need to sort of hold off on and see where USA cricket is in 5 or 10 years. And if it has developed, then we'll look back at this T20 World Cup as being one of the things that helped kickstart interest. And I think interesting what you said about sort of private investment. Again, this might be what leads development of cricket in the USA, which is very much an American thing. It's the way sport is run there. It's all private investment, franchise base, private owners. So it fits in with the culture. You know, maybe having the T20 World Cup there, and we'll get to the MLC soon, but we'll just pique a few people's interest who think, okay, I want to start investing in cricket in the USA. And once money starts pouring in, we'll get more of an infrastructure, and therefore cricket will be better off.
Yeah, and to actually, MLC is a nice segue here, because I think year upon year and season upon season, you know, that's going to be, I suppose, the golden egg of American cricket. Again, Cricket USA has next to no affiliation or responsibility with Major League Cricket at all. It's all, as you say,
IPL
coming in. Yeah, well, it's all private, you know, investors, IPL owners coming into the game. Again, you have to ask the question of, you know, how. What are the intentions of, say, the IPL owners who are coming in and using that product? You know, how much money are they taking from it? I would suspect it's quite a lot, and sort of filling their own coffers, because, you know, it's a private organization and it's a business just like anything else. But that's going to be that actual product, at least for the fan and for the players, is going to be sort of the lifeblood of where American cricket is, and the framework of having minor league cricket, which I think is 28 to 30 teams sort of outside of Major League Cricket, that's more of a seasonal competition, and all the MLC American players go back and play minor league cricket. A few West Indian boys do as well. That's your little pathway into elite cricket. So I think the issue of, say, elite cricket and the USA national team, I don't think they're really going to have a problem for the foreseeable future, because they've got a nice stable base of players. They've won matches on the field. The results speak for themselves, and they've got a nice little platform, more so on the men's side than the women's side. The women's side, they've been represented in under-19 World Cups, and they've got a nice young side coming into World Cup qualification pathways in future events. But your minor league is going to be kind of your lifeblood, and that was a thing that was always missing. There was a massive disconnect between grassroots cricket in the USA and the national team. Now there's a little bit more of an elite pathway, but again, it's done by private organizations. And again, if that's what's going to keep USA or cricket in the USA financially viable, then it would be a question of, well, how much ICC investment do you really need if it's all going to be privately invested anyway? So maybe this is just a case of the ICC throwing the money in now and saying, look, you know, this is what can be done here. Let's let the private organizations all sort themselves out, and they can be financially sustainable basically off their own bat, like what you probably want the IPL to be for the BCCI. It's only that they take all the money from the ICC as well. And maybe that's the solution. But, you know, I'm a huge fan of the MLC, and you know, as a New South Welshman, the results on the field and the Washington Freedom goes all right too, man. It's just quietly. So it's a fun product to watch, at least from the outside looking in. Absolutely. And it's a product that could really help, you know, just solidify, I think, that public attention, you know, year upon year.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take our first break, and then we'll be back with more MLC talk. All right, you're listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Manners. I'm with Daniel Beswick from the Emerging Cricket podcast, just chatting about Major League Cricket. So you mentioned before the break how you really enjoy it. It's actually rollicking up my rankings of most enjoyable T20 competitions to work. It's almost more enjoyable to watch than the Big Bash, and it's quite simply more enjoyable to watch because all the Australian stars are playing over there, as well as a host of other stars. But you've got Smith, Head, Cummins, Fraser McGurk, Short. I mean, keep going. I mean, there's lots of great Aussie players over there who usually aren't available for most of the Big Bash. So at the moment, while we record this, the top four in the MLCs, Washington Freedom and San Francisco Unicorns are 1 and 2. The Freedom has a partnership with New South Wales Cricket, so there's a strong link there. And you've got Smith, Head, Maxwell all playing there. And then for the San Francisco Unicorns, they're in second spot. They've got a partnership with Cricket Victoria, and you've got players like Josh Inglis, Jake Fraser McGurk, Matt Short, and Pat Cummins playing for the Unicorns. They're going to qualify 1 and 2. Interestingly, the two coaches for those teams, you've got Ricky Ponting as coach of the Freedom and his great mate, Shane Watson, as coach of the San Francisco Unicorns. So you can have Ponting v. Watson in the finals of the MLC. And then teams 3 and 4, you've got the Texas Super Kings. So they're obviously affiliated with the Chennai Super Kings, or owned by, not affiliated. And then the Mumbai Indians, New York. Obviously, the Mumbai Indians own that franchise, and they're going to qualify 3 and 4. I've been really enjoying the tournament so far. You're right about the ground in Dallas being very good for cricket. It looks great. The pitches have been good. You're getting good quality matches. And then Morrisville, North Carolina has held up pretty well. From an Australian point of view, Steve Smith is absolutely smoking them. And I do think there is an element where he's like, stuff you, you didn't think I was good enough for the World Cup. Hey, here I am. And I guarantee, I know Smith well enough to know, he thinks if he'd been in the World Cup, Australia would have won it. And it's hard to argue that he wouldn't have seen that chase home against Afghanistan, which would have dramatically changed our World Cup. But yeah, overall, I think MLC, I guess, Daniel, what surprised me is the level up. Last year's MLC was pretty good, but this year's just ramped up in standard.
Yeah, I think the first year for Major League Cricket was almost just to ensure that they had a nice proof of concept. And I think everyone was kind of intrigued and interested by the tournament, but I think they weren't too sure, was it just another flash in the pan tournament that this has just been thrown into the USA and we'll see it for a season. And then the news that inevitably comes out with a lot of these tournaments is, the owners of this tournament can't, financially sustain this competition, ergo it's gone. Thankfully, that doesn't happen here. We've got a nice, entrenched, nailed in concept that, proved to work last year. And I think year 2 was just when it found its strength and its identity, I think, as well. I mean, a really good mate of mine, Nate Hayes, is actually based not too far from the ground at Morrisville, North Carolina. And he's been harping on about this venue for 3-4 years. And until you really get a chance to see it on TV with all the proper cameras and not quite a stream, you don't realize how beautiful that ground is. They have issues with not really being able to put on night games because of the lights and the lighting situation there, which is a bit of a shame. So as Aussies, we can't really watch those Morrisville games because they're on at 5 a.m. or something like that.
Show some commitment, Dan. Set the alarm.
Yeah,
5 a.m.
Yeah. I'm a night owl. I'm staying up normally watching League 2 ODIs at 2 a.m. instead.
Okay. Man after my own heart.
Yeah. That. But Dallas, again, just to give you an indication of what Dallas is like, it's just an outstanding facility. There's a big influence in so it used to be
a minor league baseball ground, didn't it? And they converted it to a cricket ground.
Yeah, to explain it, it was the Texas Air Hogs minor league baseball team's ballpark in Grand Prairie, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's kind of like a 10-minute drive from the sort of the center of Dallas. Dallas is obviously the Metroplex. Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is a big area. It's probably about, as I said, 10 minutes away from the city itself. And then John, can't think of his name, the groundsman. Sorry, Menas, let me just look this up.
No, don't worry about it. No one cares. Keep going.
Yeah, the Aussie groundsman at the grounds team at Dallas do an unbelievable job putting up what was a really competitive wicket. It's slightly smaller on one side, so you do get some big scores, but there's this lovely sort of standing area kind of on one of the mid-wicket boundaries where you can kind of hang over the fence, and it's a little bit tighter than, say, some of the other boundaries, but you get one of the best views, I think, as a fan in cricket anywhere. You can see these sixes lit up over your head and into the playground behind you, and on the other side of the ground, sort of the equivalent boundary at the other end, sort of the mid-wicket boundary. They've kind of got like this hospitality bar. And again, you can kind of stand on the balcony there and get a really good vantage point of some elite cricket. And yeah, Major League Cricket for us as Aussies too. I mean, the time zone's pretty good. That night game's at 10:30 in the morning. And I don't know about you, Manners, but I sit here at my desk, doing some work, and I've got the stream on the monitor next to me. And you watch some high quality cricket. And I think they've got the balance right between the USA domestic talent and the international influence as well. And it's a great time of the year for the Aussie boys to go over there and play, because it's either that or a full season of county cricket. And I'm not sure, what the financial situation is, but I think a lot of players be more inclined to play a shorter tournament for maybe a slight cut of money, but not by a huge amount.
But there's also there's also the novelty factor, don't you think? That there's a lot of these players from all around the world, not just Aussies, who are like, okay, get paid to play cricket in the States.
Yeah.
How good is that? And 10 years ago, that would have been unthinkable.
Yeah, and I think too, like a lot of these guys would think that, they're potentially putting bums on seats and actually, driving that potential popularity in the game. They're there every season at the coalface. And, if it just means that, 50 new kids pick up a bat and ball in the country, it's only a win for the players to look back and say that they made a difference as well. So the guys that go over there, they go in there with a real interest. They're not there just on that merry-go-round of T20 cricket where, you see a lot of guys without naming names, but they find themselves in this competition, then they go straight to like the Lanka Premier League, and then fair enough.
A lot of West Indian players, especially.
Well, yeah, in saying that, but a lot of these guys are playing cricket to make sure and to ensure that there's food on the table, and it becomes very much a business. But I think a lot of the guys from everywhere who come and play MLC, I think there is kind of this extra appetite to really be the difference in
they want to be the Pele. Pele went there. All right, got to move on. So that's it for the MLC. Got to cut you off because we're running out of time. There's a couple of things I really want to talk to you about before we end this podcast. So recently, Dan Brettig made a report in the Sydney Morning Herald that the AFL Players Chief, Paul Marsh, son of Rod Marsh, is working alongside a FIFA expert to help build an alternative calendar and financial model for international cricket and be global concerns about the future of test matches beyond 2027. A couple of points about this, listeners. Firstly, this is not an ICC initiative. This is not a BCCI initiative. This is the World Players Association, formerly called FICA, doing this initiative because of their concerns about the future of cricket. So I guess this is an academic exercise. It's a theoretical exercise, but don't expect it to be implemented unless the BCCI like it, and then it may be implemented. But I guess from my point of view, I look at something like this and, the Future Tours program ends in 2027 that we currently have. And cricket's it's done. Like it's already happened that, this current Future Tours program, the big boys get their windows to play their big test series where they make money. And then everyone else, all the other nations, play a couple of tests here or there just to make the World Test Championship table, I guess, to have some integrity. But, you look at it, there's teams that have played way less test matches than others. South Africa are hardly playing any test matches in this cycle. And Daniel, the cynic in me doesn't think this is going to change too much.
I think it's good to be cynical because we're in the business that, we don't believe it until we see it. There's this famous saying that goes around in parts of, cricket media, we're not going to believe something until a ball's bowled on that particular day in that particular competition or that particular event. And it's the same with something like this. I've got to give a lot of props to the Players Association, formerly known as FICA. I think they do an unbelievable job in terms of ensuring that I think the players are the most important, part of what cricket is and why cricket is as good as a product as it is. We're lucky, we get 3 international formats. You can't find another sport that has 3 international formats. It's just a shame that it's meant that now in 2024, with the influx and the advent of T20 cricket, that we have the international formats now eating away at each other. With the Super League being scrapped on the one-day front, where's the context in one-day international cricket between outside of World Cups? There really isn't any. The only one-day international cricket with context is League Two cricket and the pathways behind that. So
how do emerging nations now qualify for the 50 over World Cup?
Yeah, so it's a long path. So one rung below, you've got League Two, which is an 8-team tournament, and the top 4 teams of that league stage, which actually goes over the course of this cycle in the build-up to the World Cup. Off the top of my head, I think it's the top 4 teams from that go straight to the Cricket World Cup qualifier, which is a 10-team event. They would take on, I believe, without looking at my notes, I think it's the bottom 2 teams on the ODI rankings from a full member standpoint.
Yep.
At a specific cutoff, and then so that gives you 6 teams, and then the other 4 teams come further down the pathway.
Because we had the qualifiers in Zimbabwe, there was that qualifying tournament before the last 50 over World Cup.
Yeah, and there was actually feeder events. So you have a cricket World Cup qualifier playoff, which is like a repechage tournament that I think gives you the last 4 teams that go into that Cricket World Cup qualifier. It's been a little while since I've had to check all these numbers again. So
well, it's all right, Daniel. We'll have listeners who'll fact check them for you.
That's exactly. You know,
I'll let you know on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to find out something. You just tweet
But
something incorrectly.
I've got something for you. So you've got this. You've got this. A lot of people going, "Oh, we've got to save Test cricket. We've got to save Test cricket." But the converse view is that T20 cricket, with limited overs cricket to the side, but T20 cricket in particular, is the path to growing the game. And I want to know, from your point of view, you look at these emerging nations, Test cricket is so friggin' far away for them. So is it really a big problem if there's only really 5 or 6 really good Test teams?
I don't think it is a problem. And I've spoken to people in the Dutch setup, I've spoken to people in the Scottish setup, and I've even spoken to people who, you know, in the Irish setup who already have full membership and already play Test cricket. They don't really see Test cricket as with any future or of any viability whatsoever. You know, the Scottish board, yeah, there's no multi-day cricket in the country. I mean, even if you gave Scotland and the Netherlands full membership tomorrow, I don't think they're striving to play an international Test match anytime soon. They don't play any multi-format. They barely play any red ball cricket at all. So how can you just expect them to just be thrown in and just want to play Test cricket? I think, and they've probably seen the poison chalice of what full membership is for Ireland and the struggles that Ireland have had since gaining full membership. Now, granted, a lot of those issues that they've had have been probably self-inflicted, but again, like what's the viability in Test cricket for those nations? I mean, you look at Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and, well, Zimbabwe, especially. Zimbabwe aren't even in the World Test Championship, but for the likes of Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, you know, what's Test cricket doing for them? There's only a handful of players that probably enjoy it because they just like playing the format, or they're better at that format than the other formats. I don't know how much multi-day cricket. I think the domestic 4-day structure in Sri Lanka has been reshaped 4 or 5 times. I don't think they can get that right. Pakistan 4-day domestic cricket has been different over the years as well. I don't think, as great as Test cricket is, you know, I love Test cricket, but I just, again, you know, outside of the big three,
I think T20 cricket could take over the world in a way that soccer did, with this huge Indian migration across the world taking cricket with them. I think T20 cricket is a vehicle, and it is the fastest growing team sport in the world. And I believe that T20 cricket could help it take over the world. And I love Test cricket and I want it preserved. But if what we're going to get is, you know, little windows where there's some Test cricket played, which is the way it's going, if Australia's only playing England, you know, India, South Africa, you know, some of the big nations, Pakistan, if we've only got 5 or 6 good Test opponents, that's enough.
Well, at South Africa, they basically relinquished a Test summer of cricket to hold the SA20 to keep themselves financially sustainable. I mean, that's probably all you need to know. But then they became rent seekers of their own product because they basically outsourced T20 cricket domestically in South Africa to India and the SA20. So, you know, they basically, you know, forecast their own demise. And yeah, what we did see was a World Test Championship test between South Africa and New Zealand, with South Africa playing what was essentially a C team. Like,
yeah, but the difference is they have a robust first class system. So
they do.
When you look at say America that we're talking about, well, if they want to play Test cricket, good luck setting up a first class system. So you know, it's going to be a long road for that. All right, so that's the future of Test cricket. It's being discussed, but it's done. Like I reported on this when the Future Tours program was released a couple of years ago. This is it. You know, you got 2 Test series, and the big boys play as many as they want. Unfortunately, that's just where we are. Another headline from Dan Brettig. There's been a report that Glenn Maxwell may play as a bowling all-rounder in Australia's tour of Sri Lanka early next year. So Australia go there in early 2025 to play 2 Test matches just at the end of January. And it could be very, very vital for Australia's defence of its World Test Championship. Glenn Maxwell famously was very close to a recall on the last tour of Sri Lanka, but at the very last minute, Travis Head was fit and therefore he didn't get picked, and he was a very sad man. If you saw the Test documentary, a few tears on that one. So it would be quite a nice story if he did get the recall.
I'd be a huge fan, Menas, and quite simply, he's one of the best players that we've produced in recent memory, and I think he's one of those players that transcends, I suppose, the normality, maybe, for a lack of a better term, of Test cricket. If you brought him in, he batted 7, he bowled 20 overs in an innings as backup to, let's say, Nathan Lyon at this point. A year from now, it could be Todd Murphy, but let's say it's Nathan Lyon. I think
Jesus, Beswick has put a line through Lyon's career.
No.
Nathan Lyon. Beswick drops Lyon.
No, I'm not dropping Lyon. I'm just saying if Lyon doesn't want to go any if he just doesn't want to go any further.
Beswick calls for Lyon's.
No, that's not what I said. If Nathan Lyon's no longer in the situation, if there's one Nathan Lyon fan in this world, it's me. Maybe you. No. I refute that. But yeah,
I've got a hot tip for you. I've got a hot tip for you then. I think Mitch Marsh could struggle in the first 3 tests against India and could be dropped, and Glenn Maxwell could play the Boxing Day and Sydney test. That is my early Menas prediction for summer 24-25. If it goes right, trust me, you'll hear me talking about it. If it goes wrong, forget this ever happened. But I believe Mitch Marsh has a problem of consistency at test level. I'd love to see him do well, but I think he could struggle against this upcoming Indian attack. And then wouldn't that be extraordinary? Glenn Maxwell played his first ever test in Australia against India at Boxing Day. He will be the perfect number 6, because then we go to Sydney for the next test and you've got Maxie who can bowl some overs there, because I don't think they'd want to play 2 spinners unless it's a real turner. So that's my early prediction.
I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility. I mean, as much as I love,
just fucking agree.
It's more a management situation. I think with someone like Mitch Marsh too, how many overs he would bowl as a bowler across those first 3 tests as well. I mean, that's certainly contributing, I'm sure, to your hypothesis here, Matt.
No, I think you'll just fuck it up with the bat.
Well, okay, you can go with that. There's potential in that as well.
Every time I put faith in Mitch Marsh, he stuffs it up. So I'm taking a negative view, and I hope he proves me wrong.
I'll remain a Mitch Marsh truther for now, but I wouldn't hate if that decision was made, assuming that he proved to be out of form per the Menas exclusive.
Sean Marsh and Mitch Marsh have embarrassed me more than any other players. I said Sean Marsh was going to score like 7,000 test runs, and he fell about 4,500 short.
In another Mitch era, Marsh was going to make 7,000 test runs. In another era, he might have done it.
Yeah.
If he was around now, if Sean Marsh was 25 right now, I think it's a different conversation. Then again, I don't know if we're going to be playing enough test cricket in the next 10 years to score 7,000 test runs, but we're treading over old territory there.
All right, Dan, we're running out of time. I know you have to go. We've got two things. We can't let it go. I've got one question for you. I wanted like a succinct, short answer. What are the implications of India refusing to play Pakistan in Pakistan they're refusing to play in Pakistan for the Champions Trophy? What are the implications for that tournament?
I don't think there are many. I think we just knew that this was a viable situation, a situation that was potentially going to happen anyway. And cricket's been put in this position several times, and they've always found a way to hold matches on neutral grounds. It's just pushing, the issues further down the road. That's basically all I've got to say.
Okay, good one. So I think I think you're right. It was fairly clear India were never going to go to Pakistan. So an alternative was going to have to be found. I guess the real sticking point will be that Pakistan v India game, because effectively now Pakistan will have to leave their home World Cup to play India.
Yeah, it's not great. And I know we just had a World Cup with India, Pakistan agreeing to play in Ahmedabad at a World Cup. But I mean, a Champions Trophy is not a huge tournament in my mind and in the grand scheme of things, if I'm honest with you. And I think if we're doing this for the sake of actually holding the competition, then I think just cut your losses and play at a neutral venue, as far as I'm concerned.
Because Pakistan will want the money. They will want the money from that game, and if they don't play that game, that'll cost a lot.
Yeah, I suppose you get it through the TV rights and things like that. Still,
that's what I mean. They'll want the TV money. So if they go, we refuse to play.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, can't let it go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. Well, I'm going to start things off because the T20 Blasters hit the finals, and in the preliminary stages, two very good friends of the show have played starring roles. So Marnus Labuschagne, in his final T20 match for the Glamorgan before coming home, took 5 for 11 in 3 overs. It's the best ever figures by a Glamorgan bowler in the T20 Blast. And I was watching the highlights. He took wickets with fast balls. He took wickets as a spinner. I think he took wickets with medium pace, off spin and leg spin. He is extraordinary. So that is a performance for the ages, and he'll be telling everyone about that. And other friend of the show, Daniel Hughes, Sydney Sixers star, he has been the leading run scorer in the T20 Blast. He's one of the best blokes going around domestic cricket. So fantastic to see him tearing it up over there as he is in the twilight of his career. Daniel Beswick, what's your can't let it go?
Oh, can't let go the best one-day international figures on debut by a men's bowler last night in Scotland. In
so we had a world record.
We did. Charlie Castle took 7 for 21 in 5.4 overs on his one-day international debut. It's the best figures by a men's bowler on one-day international debut. And he beat the record of Kagiso Rabada. I think he said it about 9 years ago. I think it was 2015. He set that record. 7 for 21. He had 4 wickets, I think, in his first 9 balls. He had 2 in his first 2. He had a triple wicket maiden.
Wow.
And then he had 4 wickets in his first 9 balls. So we had figures at one point of 4 for none. His figures got blown out a little bit. He took another
7 for 21.
Yeah, it all went downhill from there to finish with 7 for 21.
Well done to Castle from Scotland.
Yeah.
Still one of the
Aussie
weirdest.
connection too.
Yes, why?
Aussie connection, yeah. He lived in Perth and I think he studied at Sydney University as well. So he's got an Aussie connection and he might play against Australia on that tour in September as well. Good tall fast bowler, gets it sort of moving each way. He's one to keep an eye on.
Nice. All right. Well, one of the strangest games of cricket I've ever watched was the Australia-Scotland game because I was rooting for Scotland so hard.
Yeah. I think we're all on the same boat on that one. There would have been an all-time upset. It's weird watching associates play Australia for me as well.
Because you want the associates to win always.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, I'd love to have you back on the show and chat again at more length. But in the meantime, where can the listeners connect with you? Where can they find your podcast?
Twitter is Emerging Cricket. EmergingCricket.com is a website. Just find Emerging Cricket wherever you are across socials, I suppose. And then my Instagram is DGBeswick1, D for Daniel, G for Gordon, middle name Beswick1. Same on Instagram as well, but I don't know if anyone's stalking my Instagram anytime soon. So just throw that out there. Thanks, Venice.
Thank you, Daniel. Listeners, thanks for tuning into Cricket Unfiltered. All the links are in the show notes, and we'll be back next week.